male, and 2/3 of these people are fighting age males, 18 to 34. That should give you a clue. So I think this is absolutely unacceptable. That under the disguise of a refugee crisis, Europe is being invaded. That's the right word.
Francois?
I think it is a shame, really, to hear such comments on a national television channel.
Leave this word shame alone, okay? Words.
Mikla, be serious and just leave the European Union.
Let's stick to the facts, okay? I've told you to do facts, and please respond to that, okay?
The thing is, I think that we're making a wrong distinction between refugees and migrants, and I don't like the idea that refugees would be more.
Hang on, Miklos. You asked Francois for his response.
I think it is extremely dangerous if we make migrants as a kind of second-class citizens, and whereas the distinction between refugees and migrants is important for pedagogical reasons, I don't think migrants should have less rights than refugees. And I think that this distinction between political refugees and economic migrants is a little bit blurry anyway and doesn't make much sense in the world we live in.
Let's just bring in the views of some more viewers. Ken on text regarding the refugees. Yes, I feel concerned about their welfare, but can anyone let me know what security is taking place to ensure that no IS members are sneaking in with them? Derek on text, it's all very well saying Europe will have to take 160,000 refugees. Surely Europe should be doing something about the unrest in these countries like Syria and stop these civil wars. Eileen on email, if the EU think these people will go where they're told, then they're deluded. Simon on Twitter, Germany is nearly 3 times bigger than England and only has a population of around 20 million more. France is twice the size of England and has a similar population level. Dan on WhatsApp, I think the French people should help and support the refugees. Why cannot all humans treat humans with respect, whatever their status or nationality? Natasha in Vienna, just final thoughts from you, really, having heard from the others this morning.
I just wanted to mention this business about young men. It is true there are a lot of young men, but I spoke to several of them over the last few months, and many of them have literally gathered the resources of the entire family and have been sent on their way to try and make a better life in safety. And a lot of them feel an enormous pressure because they have younger siblings, they have aging parents or grandparents who had to stay in Syria or Turkey, Lebanon, could not come, and they have escaped in order to try and find a place where their family will be safe. So I think that is why we are seeing, because it's a perilous journey. I mean, no doubt. We've seen children, we've seen people dying in Austria. The smuggling of people has caused a lot of death, as you've seen in the news. So it is not a question of escaping responsibility. They are taking responsibility for their entire families to try and make a better life. So I think it's unfair to single out young men.
Natasha,
sorry.
We're out of time. Natasha, Francois, Miklos, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your views. And do stay in touch. Thanks for your views already, but do keep in touch via text and also email. Now, we've got some astonishing pictures of a Hungarian camerawoman who has been fired from her job after being caught on camera kicking and tripping up refugees fleeing from police. Petra Laszlo was filming a large group of refugees trying to run away from police in the village of Roska near the Serbian border. Seen in the blue shirt, the camerawoman was working for a local TV station. In a video posted on Twitter by German journalist Stefan Richter, a man carrying a young boy falls to the ground after she appears to deliberately stick out her leg to trip him over. Hungary's main news website also had pictures of her kicking 2 young children in another incident. The TV station, which is linked to a political party with far-right views, released a statement yesterday saying she had been fired for unacceptable behaviour. Thank you very much for joining us today. Still to come, a moment of history as Queen Elizabeth reaches a major milestone by becoming Britain's longest reigning monarch. We'll be live in Edinburgh, where she's meeting well-wishers. And not ready to start school. The government says every child born in the summer months should be allowed to begin classes a year later. It's 9:35, a summary of the main news this morning. The Queen is set to become Britain's longest ever reigning monarch today, breaking the record set by her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. At 5:30 this afternoon, Queen Elizabeth will have reigned for 63 years and 7 months. The Prime Minister will lead tributes in the House of Commons, and there will be a salute on the River Thames. The President of the European Commission has been laying out a new strategy for tackling the migrant crisis. He says the EU should resettle 160,000 refugees shared out among the member countries and called for Europe to be a place of hope.
Now is not a time to take fright. It is a time for bold, determined, concerted action by the European Union, by its member states and by its institutions.
A British Airways plane has caught fire on the runway at Las Vegas airport, forcing all 172 people on board off the flight. 13 people had to go to hospital, most of them with injuries that they got while sliding down inflatable chutes. Officials say the left engine of the London-bound plane caught fire before takeoff. The global number of child deaths has more than halved since 1990, according to the World Health Organization and UNICEF. 25 years ago, 12.7 million children aged under 5 died. But this year, the figure is expected to fall below 6 million for the first time. Most child deaths are caused by a lack of proper food. Children as young as 6 have been questioned by police over so-called sexting, according to information obtained by the Sun newspaper. More than 1,000 people under the age of 18 have been investigated for sending naked or explicit pictures of themselves. Since 2012, a quarter of those arrested were under the age of 13. Right, let's catch up with all the sport now. Jess has the details for us this morning. Morning, Jess.
Good morning, Joanna. We'll start with sailing, actually, because we have the first official members of Team GB's 2016 Olympic team. 8 sailors will be heading to Rio next summer, so we'll be talking to world champion Giles Scott. And in football, Wayne Rooney has woken up as England's greatest ever goal scorer. He got his 50th international goal last night in England's 2-0 win over Switzerland in their Euro 2016 qualifier. So he's passed Sir Bobby Charlton's 47-year record. And there were really great scenes after the game. Inside the England dressing room, an emotional Rooney was presented with a shirt, and he gave quite an emotional speech to his teammates. Now, in the world of athletics, which has been rocked in recent days, it's not often that you see sport on the front pages. This morning is one of those rare occasions. Paula Radcliffe, Great Britain's marathon world record holder, is on the front of the Times this morning. "I'm no drugs cheat," cries devastated Radcliffe. And on the front page of The Guardian, as you can see, Radcliffe devastated by doping allegations. And of course, this concerns the Parliamentary Select Committee inquiry, which raised questions yesterday about blood doping in athletics. Radcliffe feels she was effectively linked to what she calls wide-ranging accusations. She feels her hard-earned reputation has been tarnished. And in interviews this morning, she's again categorically denied she's done anything wrong. And she says the supposed abnormalities in her blood tests don't actually prove blood doping. It's far more complicated than that. It's to do with training, for example, to do with her physiological makeup. And in any case, the abnormalities that are supposedly in her blood tests are a result of altitude training. It's a very complicated situation, but we'll be diving a bit deeper into that, and that's at 10 o'clock, Joanna, so I'll see you then.
Great stuff. See you then. Thanks, Jess. The Queen will today become the longest reigning monarch in the history of Britain. During her rule of 63 years and 7 months, there have been 12 prime ministers, 12 US presidents and 7 popes. After 63 years, 216 days, 16 hours and 23 minutes on the throne, she will overtake her great-great-grandmother Victoria. The Queen was just 25 when her father, King George VI, died.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
I solemnly promise so to do.
An epoch in British political life came to an end when the Queen received the resignation of Sir Winston Churchill, Premier through the most critical period of our history. For the last time, he entertained Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh at number 10 Downing Street. And these are the first pictures in colour taken of the infant prince. Even black and white films would be heartwarming. But how much color adds to the beauty and realism? As we watch the pictures, we almost seem to be at Balmoral ourselves. To be here as winners of the FA Cup has often been described as the summit of a footballer's ambition. How much greater was the triumph they enjoyed now?
It was appropriate that the Queen's Day on the River should begin here, where the first Elizabeth was born and where there are so many royal connections. Both the Duke of Edinburgh and the Prince of Wales studied at the Royal Naval College.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
At Buckingham Palace, which has become a shrine, the Queen led other members of the royal family to pay their respects at the side of the road, just like thousands of her subjects were doing.
This afternoon, the President and his wife Michelle dropped in for tea and a chat at the palace with Her Majesty and Prince Philip, who wondered whether their jet lag meant it was hard to stay awake.
You had to get breakfast.
I had breakfast with the Prime Minister. I had meetings with the Chinese, the Russians.
And today the Thames provided the setting for this tribute to the nation's monarch. The Queen has seen many spectacular sights in the 60 years of her reign, but never anything quite such as this on the Thames.
I will continue to treasure and draw inspiration from the countless kindnesses shown to me in this country and throughout the Commonwealth. Thank you all.
Well, the Queen's reign has naturally drawn a lot of comparisons to that of Queen Victoria, her great-great-grandmother. Victoria became Queen at just 18, while Elizabeth was 25. Victoria ruled over an empire of 400 million people, while Elizabeth is head of state for 138 million people. Elizabeth II still rides in the same style of coach as Victoria did for the annual state opening of Parliament. The vehicle includes fragments of Henry VIII's warship, the Mary Rose, and Sir Isaac Newton's apple tree. Well, both queens were shot at by lone gunmen while out riding near Buckingham Palace. In 1842, John Francis came close to making Queen Victoria's reign 5 years rather than 64, when he lay in wait with a pistol as she and Prince Albert rode through London's parks. Queen Elizabeth II faced a similar ordeal in 1981 when Marcus Sargent, described by a judge as a loner, fired blanks at the Queen during the trooping of the colours. Both queens lived through a series of family scandals. Victoria's eldest son, the future King Edward VII, was a philanderer whose behaviour disgusted her. But the potential scandal was held in check. And the breakup of Prince Charles's first marriage to Diana was possibly the most damaging scandal for our current Queen. Whilst the Queen didn't want a fuss today, that was always going to be a vain hope. Bells will peal out up and down the country, cathedral services will be held, and there will be a pageant on the River Thames. The Queen herself will appear in public at Waverley Station in Edinburgh to board a train with Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. She's due to appear sometime after 10 this morning and will be there. Well, we can speak now to Lady Mary Russell, who was one of the Queen's 6 maids of honour on Coronation Day, and Ian Lloyd, a royal historian and photographer. Thank you both for joining us. Lady Mary Russell, what are your overriding memories of that day?
I think the most amazing thing was the calm in which the Queen showed that she was completely at one with what was going on. She was well trained, not as well trained as we were. We were trained to the last minute as to exactly what to do, to walk slowly up the aisle, to stand absolutely like statues for a very long time. We were very frightened about fainting, but luckily it didn't happen, although one of our number did start to sway. But anyway, it all went incredibly well, and we had the most marvellous view, of course, because we were very close to the Queen herself, and when the crown was put on her, we were right there, as it were. and it was an extraordinary moment, one I shall never, never forget.
So how much contact did you have with her prior? And did you actually talk much to her on the day?
No, we didn't. Afterwards, of course, when we went back to Buckingham Palace and everybody was relieved and happy that it had all gone so well, then she was happy and she thanked us and gave us all these brooches, which I have, which I'm not going to show you. And it was much more relaxed, but normally we didn't speak to her at all.
You describe her calm. She wasn't actually that much older than you. How did it feel for you, looking at this woman who was not very many years older than you, knowing the sort of life that lay ahead and seeing the sort of person that she was and how she would cope with that?
Well, I was full of admiration, of course, and also I felt it was almost too great a burden that she was taking on. But she was so calm and so sure of herself and of what lay in store that one was comforted by that.
I mean, of course, she had no choice. She was thrust into this role and had to do it. Have you, observing her over the years, and I know you've had some limited contact with her over the years, how have you seen her change? Has she changed over the years?
No, I don't think she has. That's the amazing thing. I think she's just the same calm, quiet, very certain of what she's doing and what her duties, and she doesn't step outside that very much, except for going racing. She loves racing and watching her horses, and that's when she's most relaxed.
Do you think she's very different in private to in public?
No, I don't think so particularly. I know people who know her much better than I do, and they say that she's got a very good sense of humour. She's also quite a good imitator, and she likes to have a good laugh.
Lady Mary Russell, thank you very much. Well, let's bring in Ian Lloyd. You're writing a book about the Queen's childhood and the sort of things that shaped her. What are your perceptions of her, someone who has been in the public eye for most of her life?
I think that word calm that Lady Mary used is interesting, because she's a very calm figure who would come into a room quite relaxed, quite formal. And I once asked her cousin Margaret Rhodes, how does the Queen cope with the fact that, say tomorrow she's opening Parliament, the sort of thing that most of us would get stressed about? And she said, well, she's got the ability to compartmentalise her life, so that if the groom's son is going to university and needs accommodation, she'll give that her thought at that time, and then she will face the challenge of the next one after that, if you see what I mean. And she said in an interview in 1992 for the film Elizabeth R documentary that she'd been trained, and she was glad she'd been trained. Her parents taught her very much to, particularly her father during the war, how to, she watched them, how they behaved, and she went on a big tour with them to South Africa. She got the training, so I think that was important from the childhood.
It must be quite exhausting, effectively always being on show.
I think the thing that impresses me is the fact that it's how she deals with the tedium, I mean, I once saw her in the Czech Republic on a tour, and she went into this room. There was about 150 people. Nothing in the room, no pictures, nothing to talk about. Just this long line of 150 people, and she started at one end, and I thought, my God, you've got to say just a few words right way around. And you can't say anything line of 150 people, and she started at one end, and I thought, my God, you know, you've got to say just a few words right the way around. And you can't say anything political, anything rude, anything that would engage them in conversation. It's got to be a slight, you know, question about health, weather, something minor, you know. And she does that day in and day out. I mean, she sees ambassadors, and, you know, and it'll be 5 ambassadors in the morning. Wouldn't you just long to say after the 4th, oh, let's leave it at that? But she doesn't.
And so, I mean, obviously, as
she said, in the country with horses and dogs. I interviewed another cousin who said that on a tour, the Queen looked out of the window at all the people, and she said, if I were mummy, I'd be down there now. Because the Queen Mother was an actress, she was a natural with people. The Queen finds it a little bit challenging at times, so you've got to respect the fact that she's been doing it for 63 years. In a job that, in some ways, she would find challenging. In some ways, she would find challenging.
And it's been said that she actually would have preferred not to have done anything today and just had
absolutely.
a quiet day, but she is going to...
It's typical of her and Prince Philip. They're the wartime generation that believe in duty. She said, again in 1992, I just wish people would take on jobs for life. I mean, you know, Margaret Thatcher was around 11 years as Premier, Tony Blair 10 years. At the time it seemed an eternity, but now as you get further on it seems a short time. But she's been around since...
She has pulled back on the number of engagements she does, but, you know, as we're going to see today, she's still very much out and about.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the photograph, the official photograph they've released, the box of documents that she does every day apart from Easter Sunday and Christmas Day, that dominates the picture, and that's her life when...
Thank you very much for coming in, Ian Lloyd. And you've been getting in touch via text. Jay on text says, I'd just like to say, God save the Queen, long may she reign. Coming up, we'll have more on the frightening moment when a British Airways plane caught fire in Las Vegas. First, if your child has a July or August birthday, it means that they'll be starting school when they've only just turned 4, which makes them a year younger potentially than most other children in their class. Although it's possible to keep them at home until they're 5, schools will often make them go straight into year 1, missing reception altogether. The schools minister, Nick Gibbs, says the policy is flawed and must be changed. He's written an open letter to parents, local authorities and head teachers, setting out his plans. He joins us now. Thank you for joining us. Why do you think it's flawed?
Well, most children born in the summer months are perfectly ready to start school in September following their 4th birthday, but there's a minority of children whose parents believe that they're not developmentally ready, that they're not mature enough to start school when they're 4, and they are already asking local authorities if they can delay the child starting school until the child is 5, when it's compulsory to start school. Now, what happens in practice is that they are granted that permission because the law doesn't require them to start school until they're 5. But instead of then starting school in reception when they do turn 5, most local authorities require that child to start in year 1, missing out the reception class because they want the child to stay with their peer group. Now, the problem with that is that they miss out a whole year's worth of teaching. They miss out on those the early start to teaching children to read and early arithmetic, and therefore they start in year 1 with another disadvantage. So we want the rules to be more flexible. So for those minority of parents who want their child to delay a year, after that delayed year, I believe, the government believes, that they should be able to start in reception rather than year 1, if that's the parents' wishes. So we're going to consult on this issue, and then subject to parliamentary approval, the rules will be changed.
The Association of Teachers and Lecturers says you're not quite addressing the issue as some see it. They're saying that the problem is the increasingly formalised national curriculum and assessment in the first few years of school. And that's, they say, the main reason why many parents want to delay the start of school for their summer-born children.
I don't accept that. That's the union's view. We believe in high standards in our schools. We believe in children learning to read as soon as they can when they start school, and all the evidence is that that is working. The new approach based on phonics means that today we have 100,000 more 6-year-olds reading more effectively than they would otherwise do. It's addressing the literacy problem that has plagued this country for many years. So I don't accept that. The issue is about flexibility. The issue is about respecting the wishes of parents, and that has been the driving force behind these reforms that I announced on Monday evening.
I mean, what about the broader question, though, of when it is best for a child to start school? Because I think we are the youngest in Europe in terms of start date for formal education. When you look to Scandinavia, it's routinely 7 years of old, and particularly looking at Finland, where kids start school at 7, they've got really long summer holidays, 11 weeks, and actually educational standards are the highest in Europe.
But don't underestimate the level of education that takes place in their kindergarten and nursery education in those countries. People like to look at the simple headline facts, but they don't look at the detail about how much teaching of reading takes place before children start school. The other factor to bear in mind is that in countries like Finland, the alphabet is very simple. There's one letter equals one sound, whereas in this country we have 26 letters and 44 sounds, and a far more complicated language. And therefore children need to begin the process of learning to read as soon as they start school. And that policy has proven very effective. As I said, over the last 4 years since the phonic policy was introduced, we have 100,000 6-year-olds now reading more effectively, and now the next approach is to improve the fluency and speed of reading, to develop this love of reading amongst young children. We have a problem internationally that children in this country are less likely to enjoy reading for pleasure than in other countries, and that isn't because they start school at 5 or start learning to read when they start school in September after they turn 4. Is simply because in the past we haven't used a rigorous systematic approach to reading, and that has changed since 2010, and it's proving very effectively. But today's policy is all about respecting the wishes of parents.
So just briefly then,
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, if a parent does exercise that right to have their child start a bit later, would you say to that parent you should actually be taking that year then to help your child learn to read and write yourself at home?
Well, increasingly, particularly with the government's approach to early years education for 3- and 4-year-olds, most parents now are sending their child to a nursery